This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The African Union sends top mediators in efforts to end the conflict between Ethiopia's Tigray and government forces. Saudi Arabia hosts an online summit of world leading economies this weekend, with the pandemic high on the agenda. And the UN evacuates vulnerable asylum seekers out of Libya to safety in Rwanda. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. We have a lot more coming your way. Here's a look at what's ahead. Mobile money comes to the rescue of aid agencies in Somalia. And in sports, Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp defends Mo Salah after the forward tested positive for coronavirus. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's take a look at some of the stories making headlines. We'll start first in Ethiopia, northern Tigray region, where fighting continues between regional forces from the Tigray's People Liberation Front and the Ethiopian government. The African Union has so far appointed 3 former heads of state as envoys to mediate in the conflict. They include Joachim Chissano, the former head of state of Mozambique, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a former Liberian president, and Kgalema Motlanthe, South Africa's ex-president. This comes amid sentiments by the Ethiopian government that the issue is internal and is merely law enforcement. Ethiopia's troops say they are advancing toward the capital of Tigray, Mekelle. This is after seizing 4 towns this week, including Aksum and Adwa. The UN agencies have raised concerns over thousands of refugees entering Sudan while escaping the violence. More than 30,000 have crossed the border, a fraction of an estimated 200,000 still expected to arrive. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says Ethiopia has still not accepted external mediation.
Until now, there has not been the acceptance by the Ethiopian authorities of any form of external mediation. And that is probably the reason why this has not yet also been discussed. There was not any initiative in the Security Council. We go on entirely at the disposal of the African Union to support any African Union initiative in this regard. And as I said, our main concern now is the dramatic humanitarian impact.
All right, let's touch base with CGTN's Gerum Chala joining us live from Addis Ababa. Gerum, as always, welcome to Africa Live. Gerum, let me start by asking you, bring us up to speed with the latest on the Tigray unrest, if you will.
Richard, the North War in Ethiopia, which is now more than 2 weeks, has continued. Overnight, we have heard heavy battles in different locations in Tigray regional state between the Ethiopian National Defense Force and loyal force to the TPLF. Now, the government has just announced that the city of Adigrat has now fallen in the hands of the National Defense Force. As you have said earlier, before that, the towns of Aksum and Adwa were also captured by the National Defense. Just a one-night time, according to sources.
Well, I believe we've lost Gerum Chala, unfortunately. Hopefully, we'll get him back a little later. We do get a sense of what he was trying to say. Let's move on to our next story. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is hosting this G20 summit this weekend, with the virtual forum to be dominated by the coronavirus pandemic and global economic crisis. Jordan, Singapore, and Switzerland will take part as guest countries as the world's wealthiest nations come together for the 2-day meeting. Meanwhile, G20 finance ministers have agreed on a new framework for restructuring government debt. Ross Cullen has more.
The coronavirus crisis has affected nearly every country in the world, but the pandemic has amplified economic problems in nations that were already struggling with high debt burdens. The G20 group of leading world players has announced a framework to help those countries with mounting payments due to creditors. G20 finance ministers have agreed to suspend debt service payments for 77 low-income countries. The World Bank estimates that highly indebted countries owe nearly $14 billion in 2020. National governments comprise 45% of the creditors. Multilateral lenders like the IMF and private lenders make up the rest. But this deal only looks at suspending payments. Campaigners argue a full cancellation of all debts is needed to avoid economic stagnation and increased poverty.
We've seen unprecedented economic action by the EU, by the UK, by the US to support their own economies. And just a small drop of that is needed to tackle this debt problem in the poorest countries. But it is vital, otherwise the next 10 years will be a lost decade.
Some economists are warning of challenges trying to get all the creditors to agree on further debt restructuring. That's because the makeup of the lenders is no longer just the Paris Club of rich countries who have historically lent money to developing nations.
The pool of the creditors is different. And so the moment you have to negotiate that restructuring, it means that at the table, they have to see different players. It's not only the Paris Club, but you have to bring in China and other emerging donors, and you have to bring in the private creditor. And this is probably at the moment the most challenging situation, because it's difficult then to have everyone agree on the same terms.
French President Emmanuel Macron was one of the first G20 leaders to call for a new deal on debt. But now France has had to prop up its own pandemic-hit economy to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
All right, we have with us Ken Gichinga, the chief economist at Mentoria Economics, joining us live via Zoom from Nairobi. Ken, thanks for joining us here on Africa Live. Let's get straight into it. African nations are worried about a possible U-turn from some of the G20 nations on promises about debt relief. What do you see happening in this regard?
Well, many thanks, Richard. I don't expect to see a U-turn from the G20 countries. These type of contracts tend to be signed on ink and paper, so I don't expect to see a U-turn. What I'm worried about is when the conversation is only about debt relief. Yes, 40% of sub-Saharan countries are facing major debt distress, but if we only link the conversation to debt relief, we might miss out on the bigger point, which is we need an expanded vision for Africa. We need to see businesses coming up. We need to see entrepreneurs coming up. So what I hope to see is the beginning of a business revolution in Africa, and that needs to be on the conversation equally with the equal importance.
All right. Important points that you've made there. It seems, though, that everyone is struggling at this time, yet the UN is asking for, listen to this, at least $28 billion more for COVID-19 vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics. What is the best and worst case scenario here?
I think the best case scenario is, yes, the UN is able to mobilize the resources that can contain the pandemic and obviously help countries with things around things such as sanitizers and things that can contain the pandemic. But I think it's very important that the UN also prepares the countries for a new economy, what is called the new economy post-COVID economy. Because as we speak, so many businesses have shut down, people have been laid off. And remember, next year, the UN has declared next year to be the year of the creative economy. So I think the best case scenario is, yes, contain the pandemic, but prepare businesses to be able to compete in the new creative economy that's coming up. I think the worst case scenario is when they only look at one area and neglect the fact that millions of people are falling into poverty, falling into unemployment. If they ignore that second part, then we're going to have, that's, I think, in my opinion, the worst case scenario.
All right, Ken, let's discuss my final question. China is giving at least $2.1 billion in debt relief to poor countries. Will this trigger similar response among other rich nations? How do you see it?
Well, that's a good point because there is often an element of geopolitics to these financial transactions. And yes, China has made a lot of inroads within Africa and the West, particularly the United States. There is a feeling that they need to catch up with the traction that China has made across Africa. So that in of itself could trigger more aid coming from the Western countries, if only to keep up with what China is doing. But I think the grand picture has to be about Africa. It has to be about the economy. Whether the money is coming from the East or the West, Africans need to start getting back onto their feet, and they need to start conducting business and creating wealth and prosperity.
Ken Gajinga, economist, live from Nairobi, speaking to us. Ken, thank you for your time. Let's move on. Leaders from the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum have held a virtual meeting. Top of the agenda was post-pandemic economic recovery. Friday's meeting ended with the unveiling of new development goals for the next 20 years and a commitment to freer trade and investment. Rian Melzer reports from Kuala Lumpur.
The end of the first ever virtual APEC meetings, with Malaysia handing over virtually to next year's host, New Zealand. The realities of the pandemic that inevitably dominated this year's event.
As a grouping whose economies constitute about 60% of the global GDP, APEC assumed a central role in spearheading post-pandemic economic recovery. We need to trade and invest our way out of the current economic downturn.
The APEC leaders' meeting culminated in the unveiling of their new set of goals, the Putrajaya Vision 2040, and a declaration with a strong commitment to freer trade and investment, boosting the digital economy and ensuring growth is both inclusive and sustainable.
While it takes into consideration the current global challenges, it is also forward-looking and ambitious, and of course this will drive economic recovery, spur growth in the region, and we hope, of course, to bring greater prosperity to be shared amongst the people of Asia Pacific.
China's President Xi Jinping said that APEC can't afford to see trade as a zero-sum political game in which one country's loss is another country's win, but rather a platform for mutually beneficial development. After saying months ago he would skip this year's meeting, US President Donald Trump did take part in the end. But his apparent disdain for the multilateral approach to trade that APEC supports has had a spillover effect, analysts say.
Unfortunately, the lack of interest from the US has somehow diminished the importance of APEC in the eyes of the American business community, which is sadly so. But we like to see the Americans coming back in full force next year.
Some leaders expressed the hope that the next US administration would be more favorable to multilateralism, trade liberalization, cooperation, and APEC itself as a means of achieving those aims. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
More reactions are coming in from Chinese President Xi Jinping's keynote speech at the 2020 APEC CEO Dialogues. Jason Pine, an expert in international economics and trade based in South Africa, agreed that mutually beneficial policies of cooperation between the international community is needed. He also shared the view that openness and inclusivity are needed for optimized multilateralism.
President Xi's speech was an excellent reflection of the expected inclusivity from the APEC region. Really confident in the interconnectivity that he also mentioned. For me, that is absolutely crucial for this agreement to actually be a success. the interconnectivity really about opening the borders, opening the economic borders, removing barriers to entry, inter-country, promoting inter-company competition, and effectively ensuring a win-win cooperation between all countries. What I would like to see is all countries benefiting equally. President Xi's speech focused on the COVID response, demonstrating an excellent understanding of what is required to ensure not just a China-based, but also a regional response plan to COVID-19. He focused on capacity building in public health, SMMEs, telemedicine. That is an excellent base to work off from to ensure that regionally there's a policy that can assist all the countries within the APAC region to fight the disease. Specifically, he mentioned the poor in remote areas. For me, that shows again that President Xi has an understanding of what the people require, what his people require, but not just his people, but also the people in the rest of the APAC countries. Economic recovery. China's shown us that with dedication, with the right policies, economic recovery out of any disastrous situation is possible, and that's what we've seen with China in recent months. I would like to congratulate President Xi on how he's put this policy changes forward.
All right, let's get a reminder of our top story at this hour. We started in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, where fighting continues between regional forces from Tigray's People's Liberation Front and the Ethiopian government. The African Union has so far appointed 3 former heads of state as envoys to mediate in the conflict. They include Joachim Chissano, the former head of state of Mozambique, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a former Liberian president, and Kgalema Motlanthe, South Africa's ex-president. Now, once again, we have CGTN's Gerum Chala joining us live from Addis Ababa. Once again, Gerum Chala, welcome back. We lost you earlier, a breakdown in transmission, but good news, we've got you back. Gerum, you were telling us about the latest developments in the Tigray unrest. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much. I was talking about an important gain made by the National Defense Force of Ethiopia, and they have announced that overnight they have controlled the city of Adigrat. It's a very strategic location, by the way, Richard. Before that, they have also controlled 2 important towns, Aksum and Adwa. The Ethiopian National Defense Force say that they are now advancing to the capital city of the regional state, Mekelle town, where they are expecting heavy fighting, retaliatory measures as well from the special force loyal to the Tigray regional state. Now, the Prime Minister has called this important gain as an impressive victory by the National Defense Forces, by the way. So fighting has continued. It's being escalated as well in different locations and battlefields. People are still being evicted, and we have also heard of civilians being casualties due to this war, Richard.
All right, Gerum, the UN says Ethiopia has been reluctant to accept international mediation, and yet the African Union has identified not 1, not 2, but 3 high-level mediators. What's your take on that, and what should we expect from Addis Ababa in this regard?
Well, the call to resolve the Ethiopian internal conflict between the northern tip regional state and the central government under Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been there ever since this conflict started about 2 weeks ago, Richard, and including the African Union itself, the United Nations, governments like the United States, neighboring states, Sudan, Kenya, even Uganda, were asking to mediate the situation at the moment. But the latest that we have heard, as you have said also, is Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the chairperson of the African Union and has now appointed 3 former presidents, and inclusive of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia, former president of Liberia. Now, they are expected to engage with the Ethiopian government. But the statement from the Ethiopian government says that, well, Ethiopia is not yet ready to stage any kind of conversation with the North until it disarms the force in the North, until they replace them with the provisional administration, and bring those people behind this conflict into justice. Now, this is really a strong stand from the beginning. It's been sustained. But South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says attempts to find an African solution for an African problem will continue, and the three personalities are expected to perhaps convince the Ethiopian authorities. But so far as we know, Ethiopia is not willing to go into any negotiating table until it finishes what it calls a law enforcement mission, Richard.
All right, Gerum Chala, thank you for keeping a close eye on that story as it unfolds. We certainly appreciate your update and report. Gerum Chala speaking to us live from Addis Ababa. Well, the news continues here on Africa Live. We appreciate your company. Here's a look at what's ahead. The UN evacuates vulnerable asylum seekers out of Libya to safety in Rwanda. And Uganda traditional banana brewing fights against being washed away by modern beer.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Administration, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Burkina Faso goes to the polls tomorrow, and President Roch Marc Kabore is seeking a second term in an election analysts say will be tight. He promised development and prosperity, but violence has been a challenge. At a rally in a stadium in Ouagadougou on Friday, Kabore offered flag-waving supporters a future of security where the displaced can regain their land and enjoy better health. In a crowded field of 13 candidates, two opponents stand out. Former Finance Minister Zefrin Diabre, who became runner-up in 2015 and who has a lot of young support, and Eddie Koboingo, who runs the party of ousted former President Blaise Compaoré and enjoys the large funding network that brings. Now, once a pocket of calm in a turbulent region, landlocked Burkina Faso has been sucked into a security crisis that has overwhelmed much of West Africa in recent years. Islamist insurgents with links to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State have killed over 2,000 people this year, according to data from the Armed Conflict and Location and Event Data Project, a consultancy that tracks political violence. Now, ethnic and religious tensions have increased, pulling at the seams of a once peaceful community. Over 1 million people have been displaced. A group of 79 vulnerable asylum seekers have been evacuated out of Libya to safety in Rwanda by the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR. Many of the asylum seekers had been previously held in detention for several years. CGTN Joy Karuki has more.
Eager asylum seekers, ready to start a new life. A safe passage being offered by the UNHCR.
I have been in a warehouse in Bani Walid. After surviving death, I say thank God that I made it this far, and now I'm optimistic about the future. I passed many difficulties in Libya. I survived dying at sea or in the desert, and God has helped me reach here. I hope people who are left behind reach a peaceful place like me, and I hope to reach where our people abroad are living. There is no limit to my happiness now.
The 79 join a list of 306 other refugees who have already been evacuated to Rwanda. This follows a 2019 agreement between the Emergency Transit Mechanism, the government of Rwanda, UNHCR, and the African Union.
I wish the governments around the world would help the people who are suffering here.
The problems we face here are not just being hungry. Life in Libya is very difficult. We get kidnapped, they sell us, and others buy us. Even while we're in the hands of the UNHCR, we do not feel fully safe because we do not know what we might face at any time while we are here. I want them to help us leave this country as fast as possible.
Asylum seekers evacuated from Libya are being taken to a transit facility in Gashora, Rwanda. The UNHCR is seeking solutions for them, including resettlement, voluntary return to countries of previous asylum or countries of origin where it is safe to do so. So far, 581 refugees have been taken out of Libya this year. UNHCR puts at more than 45,200 the number of refugees and asylum seekers registered with them in Libya. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
The journey to regain initial looks after going through chemotherapy to treat cancer, especially in women, is cumbersome. But one Diana Akech, a salonist in Nairobi, Kenya, is putting smiles back on faces of cancer patients by giving them free wigs, a reminder that they are not alone during this difficult journey. CGTN's Nick Mundima now with more.
The quest to seek and get medical attention comes with its own share of consequences. Finances are dented and conspicuous body changes mostly occur in many people. Cancer is the third leading cause of death in sub-Saharan Africa, according to the World Health Organization.
One of the most feared side effects of chemotherapy is hair loss, and more so to women. But we do encourage them that, okay, the benefits outweigh the risk. The benefit of treating the cancer is more better than the risk of just hair loss. And most of the time, the hair grows back after treatment.
Hair loss totally changes how someone looks. Here, stigma is always a recipe for low self-esteem. Diana Akech, a salonist in Nairobi, Kenya, pulled a philanthropic move to make cancer patients look good in the wake of the tough predicament of going through cancer therapy by offering free wigs.
I started doing this project 5 years ago when I lost a very good friend of mine through cancer. And I saw how it affected her when she lost her hair, the journey, the self-esteem issues. So that's when I invited her over to the salon and I gave her a free wig. And I put the story out on social media. She told me, you can share what you've done so that people can see what you've done for me. And from that day on, people just started nominating their loved ones. And as we can say right now, it's about 500 ladies so far.
Normally, buying a standard wig costs around $300, which some of them cannot afford after spending so much money on the therapy. The makeover starts with the makeup application, and after the whole process is done, most of them get emotional with the total transformation.
3, 4, 5. Wow!
Alice Wangara is a cancer patient going through her chemotherapy sessions.
Diana amefanya nisikie kama niko kasichana kadogo.
Diana has made me feel like a young girl. In fact, since I fell ill, I was just indoors. Whenever I step out, I draw attention from people. My life is always indoors, but today Diana has helped with wigs and we look really good. I feel like a young girl, and in fact, I've never smiled before like today.
For Maria Ibrahim, she beat cancer, but there was another battle, rediscovering her former self.
It has been a year since I was diagnosed with cancer. I attended all the chemotherapy sessions, but in that year, I have never looked at myself in the mirror. I always fear how I looked. But today, I'm happy, and what I've seen gives me so much hope.
For a woman, hair is everything. You know, it's not like you can go to the barber shop and just have your hair cut. This is not by choice. It's just coming off. So what happens is that once you lose that hair, you'll find most of them are stigmatized.
The process of healing indeed continues right here at this salon. Physical attributes and looks are very integral to boost one's healing process. But with all they've gone through, it's not easy for them. The wigs actually just make their life better and, of course, improve their moods. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
In Uganda, fans of traditional banana wine are worried that the craft is dying out because of the growing popularity of beer. But as CGTN's Hilary Ayaseka reports, there are some people who are still holding on to the traditional ways. Let's take a look.
This is what keeps Moses Musisi busy, making banana wine, locally known as tonto. He crushes the bananas mixed with spear grass.
I am promoting our culture, and at the same time, I earn a living.
Musisi goes through this process twice a month. It takes about an hour for Musisi to squeeze juice out of these bananas. He says it's now ready for fermentation. Fermentation takes about 2 days. In a single production, Musisi gets 140 liters, which earns him about $50. The brew is usually consumed at traditional marriages and in local bars.
We take it as an energy drink because it has natural ingredients. After a hard day's work, we consume the drink.
To increase consumption of the brew, local authorities are urging the brewers to improve their standards. They are also looking at promoting the drink for tourism.
We also encourage our people also to do it traditionally, so that people, when they are here, our visitors, not only actually visitors from out of the country, but also preserving this for the generation, so that because the generations that are coming, they must know our story.
Traditional banana wine making is still common in rural areas of Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, Burundi, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And as long as brewers like Musisi keep the wine flowing, partygoers will have enough to enjoy the traditional drink. Hilary Ayaseka, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Our coverage continues on Africa Live. Here's a look at what's ahead. Don't go away. Mobile money comes to the rescue of aid agencies in Somalia. And trade between Tunisia and other African countries falls short of expectations.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. On to Somalia now, and aid agencies have found new means of delivering aid to millions of vulnerable people as COVID-19 infections continue to rise in the country. The agencies are using Somalia's intricate mobile money infrastructure to navigate the pandemic. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo has more from Mogadishu.
Ralia Mohammed is one of thousands of displaced persons who fled conflict in the Lower Shabelle region as government forces pushed through with an offensive against Al-Shabaab. At this sprawling settlement on the outskirts of Mogadishu, the mother of two is among thousands receiving support from Save the Children, a UK-based humanitarian aid organization. However, with the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, assistance has been limited. Aid agencies are now providing cash transfer via mobile in efforts to limit the spread of the virus.
I fled conflict with my children in Janale at this camp. I have received assistance and I'm now able to prepare 3 meals for my children since we moved here. I use the remaining for the education and upkeep.
Not far from the camp lives Sitei Mose, who fled from Shalembot in Lower Shabelle.
Before the coronavirus pandemic, we used to receive $40, but now we receive $70 via mobile. This has allowed us to plan our lives. My children can now eat and receive quality education.
Dair Gedi is the program manager at Save the Children and says the country's mobile money infrastructure has played a crucial role, allowing his team to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic.
This year we have reached 60,000 families through the mobile cash transfer after signing a partnership with Homo Telecom. They send the money to beneficiaries and we verify by calling each family to confirm the amount and delivery date and time.
World Bank estimates the transaction worth approximately $2.7 billion are carried out monthly. Aid agencies are now shifting towards the system in order to reach almost 3 million people displaced by years of conflict and climate-related disasters. The best part about mobile money transfer service system in Somalia is that its clients do not incur any transfer charges, a move that has allowed aid agencies and its beneficiaries to receive money directly to their phones at no extra cost.
Due to limited movement, we created a scenario-based approach. We used the database we have for displaced persons and those benefiting from our medical assistance. The approach allowed our staff to work from home so as to protect them from contracting coronavirus, but perform required tasks as we did before the pandemic.
Statistics indicate that the penetration rate of mobile money in displaced camps stands at 72%. Leading aid agencies now say they are moving to mobile cash transfers as a likely blueprint of overcoming the pandemic and other challenges facing aid delivery in the country. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Trade between Tunisia and other African countries falls short of expectations despite the opportunities offered by the continental market. Now, this is according to authorities in Tunisia, who this week held a virtual event aimed at eliminating bottlenecks that have held back trade. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi with the details.
This event is the first large-scale Tunisian-African virtual business meeting. Tunisian businesses operating in agri-food, health, higher education, construction materials, public works, ICT, mechanical and electrical engineering industries, and textile and clothing took part in the continental event. Prime Minister Hisham Meshishi deplored the volume of trade between Tunisia and other African countries, which he said was below expectation.
The diversification of our economic partners represents a consistent strategic orientation of our country's economic policy. This trend has been confirmed by the economic and social development goals for Tunisia. It is characterized by a wide openness of the national economy to its African space. Tunisia grants a special position to its African partners while seeking to establish a win-win partnership.
The Secretary General of COMESA encouraged the streamlining of decision-making processes in Africa. She also acknowledged the role of digital technologies in increasing responsiveness and planning during the pandemic.
COMESA recognizes the effects of restrictive measures that have been introduced by member states to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Amidst these restrictions, trade has adversely been affected. Thanks to the quick action of digital technologies, it has been possible to continue operating, and this forum is a testimony to the determination that we must all carry on.
The Director General of the Export Promotion Center, CIPEX, indicated that 1,000 private sector operators representing Tunisia and other African countries took part in the digital conference.
Products of Tunisian companies are available online to 25 countries and 1,000 importers from Africa. This is an important achievement because it paves the way for exporting goods and services to other African nations.
CPEX announced that B2Match platform, which fosters business relationships, is a multifunctional platform that essentially enables the management of the various matchmaking operations in conference or B2B mode. Over 2,000 B2B meetings were held during the 3-day virtual event.
During the Tunisia-Africa e-business meetings, many experts declared that the share of African trade in the global trade does not exceed 5%, with about 16% of intra-African trade. These indicators confirm that the potential for trade between African nations remains untapped. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
The evolution of electric cars and bikes is taking center stage in Africa. Opibus, a startup company in Nairobi, Kenya, is converting petrol and diesel cars to electric cars. They have also come up with electric bikes, the first of its kind in Africa. CGTN's Nick Mondima now with more.
Tesla set the global pace by making electric vehicles, and now Africa might be on the right track positioning itself in the world of electric mobility. Opibus, a startup company driven by overwhelming effects of climate change, is now making strides. At the workshop in the outskirts of Nairobi, we find the engineers here converting a tool van to a fully functional electric vehicle. They removed the internal combustion engine and put in an electric engine, a battery system, and a control system for a complete electric car.
It all starts with receiving the vehicle and inspection. So initial inspections, we check the quality of the car, what stages in its life it's gone through, and we now start the process of renovating it. So the first thing is we remove the engine, we remove the fuel and the gearbox, because these are things that we do not require for the electric conversion.
After that, they check the feasibility of the vehicle, components like the chassis, power steering, because here they are giving a vehicle a new life. To charge the vehicle, you can charge anywhere there's electricity, and the charging port replaces that of fuel.
We are pushing electric mobility to make sure that it's affordable for everyone, right? So at this point, we're making sure that we're focusing on the areas where it makes most economic sense. The main thing that we do is, instead of importing vehicles to this region, we make sure that we build a local capacity for both assembly, design, manufacturing, and support and service of these vehicles. If we want this area of the world to have a lot of electric vehicles in 2030, we need to start now. There's no time to waste.
But just in the next go down, something caught our eyes. They're also manufacturing electric motorcycles, one of its kind. It looks sleek and compact, the parts well placed and connected.
So we have the first designed and manufactured electric motorcycle in Africa, right here. So a boda rider or a motorcycle rider can actually cut their fuel expenditure and service expenditure in half with having an electric motorcycle. They can double their income from this.
I gave it a try. Its picking power, stability, and speed is out of this world. 100% electric. The motorbike has no gear, has no clutch. It's just about acceleration as you move on. Also, the lithium-ion batteries are rechargeable. You can actually carry a backup battery, and also something special is that you can charge the battery in the comfort of your home.
When you come to electricity, when we did the calculations on electric consumption and versus the fuel consumption, we saw that there is 50% reduction. So it's a plus for them.
The electric mobility comes with lots of benefits: cheaper to maintain, zero emissions, fast, easy home charging, a quieter, more enjoyable driving experience, and the lifespan of the whole technology may go up to 30 years. The plan now for Opibus is to expand and touch base with the transport sector in Africa, step by step, to decrease oil dependency and encourage clean, silent electric energy in the continent. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Many Kenyans argue that stories told about the country often focus on the negative. One artist is trying to change the narrative through his work. Using discarded metal sheets, he tells the stories of slum life from the perspective of the community. CGTN's Joy Karuki has the details.
A muddy alleyway bustling with everyday life. Life captured in these pieces of art. Art that is attracting its own attention.
These pictures, the way they are drawn, is very good. They show everything. Like me here, I sell tomatoes, onions, and bananas, just the way it is in the slum.
Adam Masava is the artist behind these scenes. He was born and raised here in Mukuru, an informal settlement in Nairobi. The artist uses corrugated iron sheets as his canvas to capture a different side of his neighborhood.
I kind of got tired of watching people talking about the negative side of slum life. So what I did is I decided to be an ambassador of the slum by showing the positive side of slum life.
Masava collects his unique medium from building sites when landlords renovate their houses.
And I burn them in a big fire to make them lose weight because they are normally well treated to avoid rust. Then after burning them, I smash them flat with a hammer, then cut them into sizes of my frames. Then I stretch them on the frames. After that, I do my sketches. After doing sketches, I treat them. I only treat the parts where I want to paint, so that I leave the other spaces to have the natural look, because when you treat it, it turns it into a one dark color, which denies the iron, which denies it an opportunity to shine as a medium.
If one man's meat is another man's poison, then for Adam Masava, your trash is his platform to recreate the environment and tell the story of the slum for future generations.
The artist explains how he discovered his medium after facing rejection.
I used to bring my works to galleries or exhibitions. Some of them were rejected. And then I came back and started thinking how I can present my work in a different way. And then this idea came up, and I thank God because it has transformed me.
A transformation that won him the Mukuru Youth Initiative Best Male Fine Artist of the Year. But beyond his work, Masava is also recognized as a community worker. He set up the Mukuru Art Club in 2010, where he teaches young people for free.
As an artist, I've grown, I've been able to express myself. For example, the themes that I'm painting, they can really help other girls in the society, and also they can help other girls to inspire them to paint.
I'm trying to mentor them, trying to get them into being professional artists.
Masava says being of service to others brings him satisfaction and hopes to continue to effect change in society through his teaching and his art. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. We will see you on the other side of the break with more news stories. Here's a look at what's ahead. As the doom and gloom of the pandemic persists, a Kenyan with physical challenges inspires others through art. Welcome back. Over the past 9 months, many people have been taking action and developing creative ideas to face the challenges associated with COVID-19. Among them is a young man in Kenya's city of Kisumu who, despite his physical disability, is keeping a positive spirit and inspiring others through his artwork to earn a living. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy tells us more.
His name is Gideon Lungashi, physically impaired at an early age after battling with hemophilia, an inherited bleeding disorder.
When I reached class 7, I met some doctors from Kijabe Hospital. And so they told me, with time, that prosthetic I was using, with time it is going to cause harm on the upper thighs of my leg. So the best thing was to do an amputation and give me the modern prosthetic. So I agreed. We did the amputation.
Lungashi is an artist and lives in Kisumu's Manyata suburb. He produces products such as wall hangings and paintings, among others. His good works have earned him numerous lucrative tenders to supply local hotels with his products. Just like many people living with disability, Lungashi lost his earnings due to the coronavirus outbreak. But his positive attitude in the midst of the deadly pandemic has become an assurance to many young people living in his neighborhood.
I look at myself. My hands are working. my eyes are seeing, I have the strength. The Lord has blessed me with anything possible that any other person can ask for, to do anything that that person wants. So the notion of like going to the street and asking for something is just, doesn't add up. So to me, use what you have.
The impact of the coronavirus compelled Lungashi to diversify his trade into producing hotel menus, a decision that has turned profitable and helped him secure a tender to supply over 200 designer menus to a local hotel in Kisumu. Vavik Odhiambo is a 28-year-old portraitist living in Kisumu's Manyata suburb. Odhiambo is one among many other youth in Lungashi's neighborhood who have been inspired by his works and now running his own business.
So I realized if Gideon, in his disability level, he could work and do something. That really motivated me. So I realized from him, I can learn something, and through him, I could get more knowledge, which motivated me. Like, he's very creative in craft work. So from him, that's where I got the idea of making frames.
Gideon's resilience and effort has earned him the praise of many and motivated other young people to find something to do with themselves.
Gideon's endurance continues to shine light in the lives of many young people in Kisumu's Manyata suburb, especially those who have chosen to follow his love and passion for art. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Kisumu, Kenya.